What? Whoa.
Hello, welcome to Cattle Chats. We're so excited you're here. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Brittany Sweeney with the Livestock Conservancy, and I couldn't be more excited to welcome our special guest, Dr. Richard Browning from Tennessee State University, and our awesome and amazing guest host, Martha Hoffman Kerestes. Thanks for joining today, y'all.
Welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah, great to be here.
Awesome. Well, Martha, do you want to introduce yourself? And then Dr. Browning, do you want to introduce yourself and kind of let people know a little bit about what you do and the type of cattle you work with?
Yeah, so I grew up, actually my family started working with Dutch belted and milking shorthorn dual purpose dairy cattle. So I'm kind of second generation. The cows kind of chose me in the rare breeds world. So I continue where my parents have started with both breeding and selling breeding stock and semen and mentoring new breeders, which is such a pleasure.
That's awesome.
Okay, I've been an animal scientist here at Tennessee State University. It's since '94, so I've been here for a minute. And we've been engaged in livestock research, ruminant research. From the time I got here, we were doing just really looking at heat tolerant genetics in regular commercial type cattle. Then about 2002 we switched over to goats, and we've been for the last 20 years been doing work with meat goats and looking at a number of breeds, including a couple of heritage breeds, being the Spanish and the myotonic goat. And then we got back into cattle back in 2016. We introduced a herd of Dexter cattle to the university, and now we're running the Dexter cattle with the goats. In my background, I grew up in Texas and showing Brahman cattle, and I've always had an interest in cattle, and they paid my way through college. The cattle did, and so once we got back into cattle back in 2016, I was really enthused about being able to get back to something I really enjoy working with. Enjoy the goats also, but I grew up with the cattle.
That's fantastic. Well, I'll just remind everyone to write us a comment. Let us know you're here. We have some awesome cattle experts to answer your questions. So leave us a comment. Let us know what you want to talk about today. And Martha, I believe you have some questions that you'd like to talk to Dr. Browning about.
Yeah, so you mentioned you started working on the performance data with the goats, but now you're looking to apply some of what you worked on in the Dexter cattle. Can you tell me a little bit about like where you're at with the Dexter data? What kind of things?
Yeah, when we growing up with cattle and working with cattle and showing cattle, we always were because we're talking about commercial production. Data was really important. It was really important in making selection decisions and in mating decisions, and even selecting what breeds you might want to use. And when we switched over to meat goats, it was like a shock to me that data wasn't important for meat goats. It was all about pedigrees and show ring performance, but there was really there wasn't a culture of performance data in data recording in goats. And one or two of the breeds that we've worked with, particularly the Kiko goats that we spent a lot of time with, a lot of the producers have kind of adopted over time. They've adopted performance recording protocols in their management systems, which is encouraging. And then once we got into Dexter cattle, which is kind of a whole different deal, not a commercial breed, I noticed that we kind of had the same situation in place, that data recording wasn't part of the culture of raising these animals. And part of it because a lot of them was really small homestead type herds, very few animals. And so data just really wasn't seen as an important aspect of them having these animals. And so what we've been doing over the since we've been running since 2016, we've been just collecting performance data. And we put the herd together in part to do some research with small scale cattle. We also were looking at these animals from an educational perspective. We've got students that come in our animal science program. Many of them have never been around cattle. Some of them wanted to go to vet school, maybe work with livestock, maybe work with exotic animals or companion animals. But we want to have them experience working with cattle. And Dexter cattle, they're not intimidating. They're easy to work with. They really complement our goat program. A lot of the facilities that we use for the goats, we actually use them for the Dexter cattle. And our performance recording comes out of our interest in doing research and having students engaged in research, and also just have an interest in getting more producers to collect data, because when you collect data, you can better characterize the breed that you're working with. Stories are nice. Anecdotal information is good, but if you want to really characterize and understand where the breed is at, a breed or any population of animals, and where you want to take them, are they where you want them to be? Do you need to move them? Do you need to improve something? You have to have data to work with, and I'm a numbers person naturally. I like to see the numbers. Stories are nice, but I like to see the numbers to kind of back up the narrative. And so we have 5 or 6 years, 7 years now of performance data on the Dexter herd. And I like when we talk about Dexter cattle, and I get around some of my colleagues from other universities, or they come to the farm and say, can you tell me what breed of cattle that is? And they really don't know. So they're small, we can see that. And because we have, I think we have probably maybe the only institutional herd of Dexter cattle in the country. Most universities, they're doing commercial breeds, Angus and Charolais and Hereford and Limousine and those types of things. And so when we decided to get into cattle, so let's just do something totally different. We did that with the goats. We went against the grain. When everybody was breeding one breed of goat, we went to the other breed of goat, and we got a little bit of ridicule about it. But in the end, the whole industry has shifted away from that breed that everybody was working on back in 2000, 2001, and now have come to where we're at, working with Spanish goats and working with Kiko goats. I don't see everybody shifting to Dexter cattle, but there's certainly a niche, and there's certainly an opportunity for small farms to utilize Dexter cattle or some of the other smaller, what I like to call heritage or alternative breeds, to maybe enhance some of the economic returns that they see from their cattle operations.
Interesting. Yeah, I was curious. Is how the heritage breed and the preservation of the breed played into your decision to use them as your in your institution, because it is very rare.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that came to mind when we start looking at a breed is small. They didn't give me but a few acres of land, and so I said we've got to do something small. And that's the first. And I didn't think heritage. I didn't think preservation. I thought small. So what breeds out there that are small that might work? And I looked at 2 or 3 different options, and the Dexter cattle kind of rose to the top, mainly because they are a breed that they've been small. They've always been small. They've never been pushed through commercial pressures to increase in size. And so we're working with a breed that, for the most part, has not changed all that much, in the last 150 years or so. And that was real interesting. And then the fact that nobody else has them, at least in terms of universities or institutions. So if you do something unique like that, work with something unique, that's another something that attracted me to going with the Dexter cattle. And at the time, I wasn't even thinking about them as dual purpose, because we're doing beef research, and I said, well, they're small. And it wasn't until after I got into it really deeply that I found that they're really a dual purpose, or some people might say call them a triple purpose breed. But we're looking at them more from the beef perspective than the dairy. We're not milking any cows here. but we're looking at them in terms of how they might fit in a beef scenario.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, it's really interesting how some of the unique characteristics of these different heritage breeds have their own niches, like in your place with a smaller amount of acreage that a big cow you couldn't do nearly. That's really neat.
Yeah. They're in just speaking in terms of the beef industry, they're going towards moderation. A lot of folks have realized that these cattle have gotten too big, and there are actually competing interests out there. No, I think the cow folks are realizing that these cattle have gotten too big, but all the signals that come down from the feedlot, from the packers and the feedlots are saying we need them bigger, bigger, and bigger. So at some point, you got to determine, whose interest should you be trying to serve first? Is it, somebody, downstream of you, or is it your own? You got to look at your own economics and what works for you. We did that with the goats as well. We had folks that were trying to satisfy the interest of buyers, and they were losing money in the process. And they realized that, hey, I need to at some point look at my own bottom line and what can I do to generate not just revenue but profit with the goats and find that happy medium. And I think that's what's going on with the beef industry. But if you go to the other extreme, where Dexter's on the other extreme, when you go with a breed like this, you don't necessarily have the commercial sector in mind. That's one thing I always advise prospective producers, particularly of Dexter cattle, is that if you're planning on getting the Dexter cattle, don't look at them as a commercial breed that you're gonna take calves to a sale barn or kind of do that. They just don't work. They don't fit. So we're past that moderate size and we're to a truly small size. And when we speak to folks looking at Dexter cattle, I like to say that you have to start looking at alternative forms of marketing and have some kind of an avenue. Again, we're talking beef. We're not talking about the folks that want a couple of cows for the family and want to milk. Folks that want to do it on a little bit larger scale, because we're breeding 100 Dexter cows here right now, and we've got six Dexter bulls out there. So it's probably one of the larger herds of Dexter cattle that's out there. And in terms of marketing, we just sell our steers. We sell steers to folks that are wanting to do grass fed, grass finished, or at least local marketing. And there's a growing demand for that. And in a smaller animal like a Dexter, whether you run them purebred or if you're crossing with something else, seems to be a pretty good fit. And we haven't had a lack of interest in steers. We usually have more inquiries than we do steers to sell every year, which is unfortunate because I like to sell everybody a steer that wants one or two or three, but we just haven't been able to produce enough steers to satisfy all the interest that's out there.
Well, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah. And but it shows that there's opportunity out there.
Absolutely.
And it seems to be growing.
Yeah. Dr. Browning, through those I'm going to go back to your numbers because I am also a numbers person. Is there anything in the data that you've been collecting that's kind of surprised you or that you found really interesting?
Well, I tell you, the very first set of numbers that we look at, I don't think it surprised us as it surprised some folks that we were interacting with early on. And I like to tell this story. I forgot who the producer was, but there's this narrative and there's a lot of information out there saying that Dexter calves, when they're born, they weigh like 35 or 40 pounds. They're really small calves. And so we started collecting data on our cattle, and they were weighing 50, 55 pounds, maybe 60 pounds. And so I relayed that to one of the early producers that we were interacting with, and they were like, "You're doing something different with those cattle. You must be feeding them. Are you feeding them?" I said, "No, we're not feeding them. We're not doing anything. We just got them out there on pasture." And so I think that producer decided that they're going to weigh their own calves. And what do you think they found out? their calves weigh 55 pounds also. And so it just goes to show that you really don't know what you have until you start collecting the data. And I think a lot of producers, there's a few producers actually starting to collect data and they're realizing, hey, these cattle may be a little bit heavier at birth than what some of the literature says. And some of that may come from the fact that, some of these descriptions might have come from maybe decades ago. And we know that, even if you don't really perfectly select for increased size or something like that, you'll see changes, better nutrition, better herd health management will enhance, will increase some of those numbers. And there's still going to be some folks that will see, and we see birth weights on occasion that are in the 40s, mid to upper 40s. But our average birth weights are, 50, 55, 60 pounds, depending if we're talking about bull calves or heifer calves. But the project that we're working on now that's really interesting is we've got this hair shedding project that we're doing. And we noticed early on in our herd, we're in Middle Tennessee, that about this time of year, in May and June, that we'd have some cows that had pretty much lost all their winter hair, and we had other cows that still had a really nice thick coat of hair on them. And so about 3 or 4 years ago, I got with my research assistant. She's associate now, and one of the students said, "Let's score these cows. Let's just score these cows and see if there's any influence of this hair retention on performance." And I did not realize. I think I told somebody like a week or two ago. So I did not realize that there was a large effort on the commercial cattle side looking at hair shedding across several states. So this was kind of an organic project development that took place, and it's kind of a spontaneous thing. And what we found out was, even in the Dexter cattle, that the rate of hair shedding or the timing of hair loss, of this winter hair loss, influenced the weights of their calves at weaning significantly. But probably the more fascinating find is that it influences fertility in these cows. And they haven't really even seen that in the commercial herds. No, we calve in the spring. Most of the hair shedding work on the commercial side has been using fall calvers, because there's this push for fall calvers, which I'm not a big fan of fall calving. So we calve all of our cows out in the spring, and we have found that those cows that shed earlier in the year have higher fertility rates. They have higher pregnancy rates. They wean off a higher percentage of calves compared to those that shed later in the year. It's not absolute, but on average, you get a significant boost in fertility, and it kind of makes sense, because we're in Middle Tennessee. We're kind of on the northern fringes of the subtropics here, and between the summer heat. So if you're having spring calves, if you're kind of getting towards this whole get back to the natural routine of things, that means you're gonna have spring calves, which means you're putting bulls out in the summertime. We put our bulls out 4th of July week is when we put bulls out. And so between the summer heat, we've got a lot of fescue. Anybody familiar with, if you're in the fescue region, you know about fescue toxicosis and how that is going to impact thermoregulation. These animals are heat stressed. We're dealing with a breed from Ireland, and Ireland is not noted for a subtropical climate. And so you've got a breed just like any other British breed, Angus, Hereford, Jersey, they're really not suited for a warm, humid climate. And then, whatever's going on with climate change, you've got a lot of factors working against you if you have an animal that's not tolerant of heat. And so just being able to have those cows shed off earlier, the natural state, seems to give these cows a boost. And it is heritable, and so you can't select for it. You can add that, again, talking about recording and collecting data. That's another data point that you can record in your Dexter cows, particularly in the southern states. Now how early are these cows shedding out? So we've been collecting hair shedding data since 2019 on the herd now. So we're in our 4th year of collecting now. And that's been, in terms of, outcomes as a result of data collection, that's been probably one of the biggest eye openers, that even these little Dexter cows, hair shedding, at least in our part of the country, under our management system, seems to impact fertility rates.
That's so interesting. Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So what other types of, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what other types of data points are you collecting? You mentioned like birth weights, but I'm curious what all you've been working on.
Well, right now, outside of we do birth weights, we collect weaning weights. We've been collecting 3-month weights because we want to kind of get a midpoint of that mid lactation these cows. What are these calves looking like? So we collect birth, 3, and we wean at 7 months of age. We collect weaning weights. The last 2 years, we had a tornado come through the farm a couple of years ago, wipe everything out. And so we were forced to actually leave our heifer calves on the cows. And we weren't weaning those we weren't truly weaning the heifer calves off the cows until about 10 or 11 months of age. About the time they were ready to calve again, and we said, we got to get these calves off. A lot of them had probably self-weaned anyhow. It actually made weaning stress a lot easier on those heifer calves. Very little balling. But we take weaning weights about 7 months of age. We do yearling weights on the heifers. Most of the steers will have been sold by then. So we do yearling weights on the heifers. We do hip height on the calves at weaning and at yearling. One of the things that I noticed when we got into working with Dexter cattle is that there was this guide or this recommendation, or it was more like a guide, is that these animals shouldn't be they should have a certain height at 3 years of age. And the first thing to come in my mind is waiting to their 3 years of age to see if they meet whatever guideline is there. That's a little bit too long. Can I guesstimate? Can I somehow get that height measured earlier than 3 years of age? And so what we're doing, we're collecting hip height and tying it to frame score. Supposedly, the frame score of an animal at 7 or 8 months of age should be fairly close to the frame score when they're 3 years of age. And so we haven't started analyzing that data yet, but we're collecting hip height on all of our cattle every time we take weights. So at weaning, at 12 months, at 24, at 36, at 48, we're taking hip height. And then we'll go back and track those to see, can we get a good estimate of 3-year hip height at weaning or at yearling age. That's something else that we're collecting. Of course, we're doing the reproductive data. Looking at reproductive outputs. That's the most important trait in a cattle operation. More important than growth and carcasses and all this other stuff. If the cows aren't reproducing, none of the other traits matter. So we're looking at that. This year, I've got a new employee came in and she's had some experience with this. So this year we're starting teat scoring and udder scoring. So for the next few years, every cow at calving will have a teat score and an udder score recorded. And that's something that we'll look at. On the beef side, there's some research in just commercial herds showing that teat score or udder score didn't have a major impact on weaning weights. It may be more important on the dairy side than on the beef side. And I can say probably one of the cows with the worst udders you would see weans off the heaviest calves every year, and she's been fertile. And so in a situation like that, I said, well, no, she's doing her job. She's raising a calf. I might not keep a herd sire out of her because she's doing her job, but her udder is like, that is not something you want to pass on. But she has a daughter. She had like 3 straight bull calves. I need a daughter out of her to see how her daughter's udder looks. Daughter's udder looks fine. I got to go back and see what the sire is. And so that's again, working with genetics. We try to hedge our bets with data, but oftentimes it's kind of a crapshoot on what you're going to get, particularly when there's very little data to go on. We don't have EPDs, we don't have genomics to work with our Dexter cattle, so it's really just phenotypic, records, observations, and maybe over time we will get enough data that we can really get a better handle on what are the genetics of what we're looking at versus what are the non-genetic inputs that are causing what we're seeing in our animals. So it's something that long term we're looking at. So what other traits are we looking? I think that probably covers most of it. Just basic performance records is all we're doing. We have some data that we still need to analyze, and I'm waiting for maybe a grad student to come in and start working on some of that data. The hair shedding, we still have a lot of work to do on that. We're working with another breed, a heat tolerant breed out of a tropical breed out of Africa that we're doing some crossing with the Dexter cattle, and that's really showing some real interesting data on that. So we'll keep running the Dexter cattle. We'll start producing some crosses out of this other breed and start doing some evaluations on them. We've had some buyers that really like the straight Dexters, and we've had some buyers that have shown a preference for the Dexter crosses for what they're doing. The one thing that we still need to put together, we haven't done yet, is the carcass data. That's the one missing part of our research activities. We've got the reproduction, we've got the growth, we need to get the carcass data, and that's something that we're working on. And so hopefully over the next year or two, we'll come up with a partner or two that we can actually add that component to our portfolio of performance data.
Neat, yeah.
That's all great stuff. Do you mind if we take a few questions from our audience?
No problem, go ahead.
All right. Hi, Winifred. Thanks for joining us today. Winifred says, this is fascinating, and I'm excited to learn more of Dr. Browning's work.
Well, we have an open gate policy. My wife, she's a veterinarian. She's all about biosecurity, but that's all right. People come in, come visit, see what we're doing, tell us what we're doing wrong. And we've had a couple of producers that come in and have actually told us, y'all need to be doing something a little bit different here. But we take everything in, and we whether you can come in and visit. Sometimes folks are just in the Middle Tennessee area and they want to stop by and see, or like we've had folks that have come in for the goats and they see the cattle, and all of a sudden they have an interest, and we've got at least 2 or 3 goat producers that since they visited us have added cattle or Dexter cattle to their program. And early on when we were doing goats, I always had an interest in introducing some small cattle to benefit the goats, because we know that with goats, meat goats, we've got a big problem with internal parasitism. And if you co-graze goats with cattle, that kind of helps the goats because you eliminate some of the internal parasites. I always wanted some small scale cattle with the goats. And so once we got the cattle in, now it really works out good, because we can do some co-grazing or alternative grazing, multi-species grazing, whatever you want to call it. And it helps out. And the students are fascinated because they see where the goats have been, it's all grass, and we need to put the cattle over there. And then where they see the cattle have been, it's all weeds. We need to put the goats over there. So they're really getting to see differences in grazing, browsing behavior, and how that influences the composition of plant species on a particular piece of land. So once we get past all this tornado issue we're dealing with and get our fencing together, then we're going to see if we can do a better job of really a systematic rotational grazing to take advantage of what both the cattle and the goats offer in terms of prepping the land for the other species.
That's great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Thomas. Thanks for joining us today. Thomas says, are your Dexters horned or polled?
We have both. We've got I should say they're polled, and the ones that have horn genetics, most of them are dehorned. We've got, in terms of actual intact horned animals, we might have maybe 4 or 5 that actually have horns, but a lot of our cattle and the majority of our herd is heterozygous poles. And so we're breeding for pole cattle, but what we're trying to do is breed for pole. There's a thing within the breed population. There's a lot of inbreeding in some animals with some high inbreeding coefficients because of that really that laser focus on pole genetics. And so we're breeding for pole, but at the same time we're trying to unravel some of that inbreeding. And that's really from a perspective of us trying to maintain some level of genetic diversity in the research herd. We've had bulls that we brought in with inbreeding coefficients. I might be getting a little bit too technical, but we've had bulls with inbreeding coefficients like 0.2 and 0.25, which is really high. And I'm kind of amazed, pleasantly, I guess, that there really hadn't been any major lethal genes that just have popped up because of these high levels of inbreeding that we're seeing in some of these herds, some of these genetic lines. And so most of our cattle are pole. We're breeding for pole. We've got 3 bulls that we're using that are heterozygous pole, but have that pole ancestor once, like 4 or 5 generations back, and everything else is all non-pole genetics. And so that's what we're striving for: maintaining pole genetics, but unraveling some of that heavy inbreeding that has taken place over the last 20 years or so, with that push for polled animals.
Great question,
Yeah.
Thomas. Thomas also wants to know what % of your Dexter cattle in the university herd carry a gene for chondrodysplasia? Select to eliminate that gene.
0. we don't have any chondro animals. I think we had a cow at one time had chondro, but she didn't stay in the herd long because her reproductive output wasn't all that good. And we typically we'll cull a cow if she misses a second weaning of a calf, then she's out the herd. But yeah, we stay away from the chondro. No, it's a condition that I've had some interest in, not to the point of wanting to breed it into the herd. And we have a lot of anecdotal information out there about the benefits of chondro carriers versus non-carriers, and it would be interesting to kind of have some data to show, what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks outside of having it, understanding the lethal aspect of that allele. And I've thought about it maybe more in a terminal sire kind of a scenario, that we breed to produce chondros if there's any benefit on the carcass side of it, but use it more as a terminal. Because you have a chondro carrier, you don't have any choice but to breed her to a normal cow anyhow, unless you willing to sacrifice a percentage of your calf crop, with that lethal allele combining in a homozygous state. And I know some people say that's the history of the breed, and that's fine. And for those producers that like carrying it and breeding it, long as they're doing it responsibly and not, I say responsibly, not creating a lot of biological loss or inefficiency by having a lot of cows that are aborting, then that's fine if it's part of the history. But in the research herd, we avoid it.
All right. Hi, Ruth. Yeah, Ruth reminds us that the chondro carriers created the Irish Dexter breed.
Okay. Yeah. There's a good number of folks out there that they swear by the chondro gene. That's fine. And whether you do in this, one of the I was talking about earlier how in the goats we always were able to stay above the fray in terms of politics, but within 2 or 3 months within the Dexter, we were in the middle of some stuff, we'll say. Whether you're a fan or not a fan of chondro, or a fan or not a fan of horned cattle or rares or what have you, Every breeder has to make their own decision on what's best for what they're doing, what's best for their production system, what's best for their marketing system. And I don't have any preference on what other producers do. Whether they keep chondro in the herd or not, whether they breed for pole, whether they do heavy line breeding for poles or not, or reds or what have you, or another thing that got into the selection early, and we haven't been doing it that long. There's producers that have been doing it a lot longer than us, but at one time, I think it's died down some, but like this A2 gene, and which is folks that are free with A2, that's a gene that affects, or an allele of a gene, a version of a gene that affects milk proteins, and everybody was all over that. And we bought some of our better bulls because they weren't A2 bulls, and they said, we're going to sell them. I said, hey, I'll take them off your hands because we're not milking anything here. And they've been some of the better bulls that we've had. And so all those things, when you're breeding, every producer's got to make their own decision on what traits, what characteristics, what aspects of these animals are going to work in their program. And whether a producer likes what another producer is doing or not doing, I try to stay out of that as best I can. But I heard we have horn and pole. We don't have any chondro. We've got all three colors. We have reds and blacks and duns, and we're not breeding for any particular color of cattle right now. But I certainly appreciate that the chondro allele is an important part of the history of the breed.
Yeah. Let's see. I think I've got one more question. If anybody else has questions, feel free to type them in. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Hi, Grant. Thanks for joining us today. Grant says, is your herd data published anywhere?
We gave a presentation in Mississippi a week or two ago where we presented some data, and I've had students present some of the data. If somebody wants, in the hip height, have we done much on the hip height? I think I need to get a student to work on the hip height data. That's one that I need to get a student working on. But if somebody wants to see what our numbers look like, they can just email me. We haven't put any of that up on the website yet. But if somebody wants to see what our numbers are, I'd be more than welcome to send some of our herd means, maybe some of those slides from one or two of those presentations that we presented over the last year on the performance aspects of the research herd. So we have that. Our average weaning weights, just off the top of my head, oh wow, I thought I had something around here. Wait a minute. Our weaning weights. Do I have weaning weights on here? Okay, about 300 pounds. That's across sexes. Now, this show the influence of hair shedding on these animals. This is something that I presented at the program in Mississippi. And so our early shedding cows, they were weaning off 310 pounds. In our low shedding or late shedders, they were weaning off 282 pounds. So you only 30 pounds difference just on whether a cow shedded early or shedded late. And these are spring calves. We don't creep feed or anything like that. It's all just mama's milk and whatever grass they're consuming out there. So if the individual wants to kind of see what we've got in terms of weaning weights or yearling weights or birth weights or what have you, just shoot me an email, and I can share that with you. And hopefully they have some data that we can compare numbers.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah.
Let's see. Ruth says, does the college ever host beef shows? I am originally from Michigan, and MSU hosted a couple of shows a year to help promote the beef breeds.
No, we don't have any cattle shows. We don't have a facility here. But we certainly would, welcome helping, if somebody's wanting to do a show and wanted to include Dexter Cattle in it. I know that at one time, I'm not sure. I don't even know if they even do it anymore. But they'll have the the Mother Earth News fairs that they had, and I would try, if I knew there was one in the area that I was going to go to, I'd try to encourage one or two of the Dexter breeders to maybe take some cattle up there and kind of get them on display. One thing that we have kind of kicked around the idea of of um, getting Dexter cattle, particularly for like 4-H and FFA programs. Sometimes that could be a challenge, getting some of the non-traditional alternative breeds in. Coming up with a way to get more opportunities in the youth shows for these kind of animals. Right now, everybody, if you're not showing some club calves that are Angus cross or Charolais, something like that, a lot of places they don't meet the weight requirements, and they're unless they have an all other breeds classification, which not all shows have them. That could be a challenge. So Michigan State, I'm sure they have a lot of influence on putting that part up in that state of interacting with the county fair boards and what have you to really push some of these beef shows. Here in Tennessee, we have some beef shows, and University of Tennessee handles some of that. But they're like a lot of the universities. They're the larger schools that are doing the commercial cattle, and if you get to talking about Dexters or belted Galloways or something like that, you can kind of get a funny look. Say what? Maybe next time. So that's one thing we pride ourselves on here is working with the alternatives, the less known breeds, but the breeds that have something to offer that the large breeds may not offer.
Great questions. Martha, did you have other questions that you'd like to get to?
Yeah, I'm just curious. So, the kind of what you'd suggest for somebody maybe wanting to get into taking data off of their herd, where you suggest might be a good place to start?
One of the challenges, even with goat herds, we notice is the cost of data collection, particularly collecting weights, and scales are not cheap. So we're talking birth weights and weaning weights and yield weights. Or if even if you're retaining ownership of your steers and you're selling grass-fed beef, you're doing freezer beef, you like to kind of know what the weights of your animals are when they're going to the processor. So I've always try to get producers to think that maybe you don't necessarily have to buy scales. You're not going to use scales. You don't have a big feedlot. You're going to be running cattle across the scale every week or so. So if you can find a way to borrow a scale, I always tell folks that say your local hospital has an FFA program, and they may let you borrow their scale. And when they send you their scale, they may also send you some FFA students to do their community service. Now you got extra help with your animals. Some of the counties may have scales. They have scales for the weigh-in of the steers at the county fairs. You might be able to find something like that. And some of these calves, depending on how big they are, maybe a hog scale may work for some of these calves, depending on how early you wean them and that sort of thing. Weigh tapes, they're certainly a lot cheaper than scales. They're better than nothing at all. And I spoke to a producer that actually he buys steers from us, but he doesn't have scales. And I just mentioned weight tapes. I never even thought about that. I'm gonna go weight tape all my animals now. It's better than nothing. Actually, we did have a little project started to look at the correlation between weight tape measurements and scale weights, and we need to pick that back up. So determine what traits are important. Certainly, weights. If you're concerned about frame score, hip height, because that's something in the breed that I'm always hearing, people talking about cattle being too big, getting beyond what the Dexter should be. You got to record that. and find out where exactly where is the breed in terms of hip across a broad spectrum of animals. Maybe at the they have their show coming up. Maybe they should do hip height measurements on all the bulls there, and kind of find out where is the breed at, just in terms of show cattle. A lot of times those are the cattle that end up providing genetics to the rest of the breeders, and so those are the genetics that are going to influence the performance of the other herds within the breed. Hair scoring, you don't have to do it like we do it every 2 weeks. If you can do it maybe run that critical time of mid-May to mid-June, that seems to be that sweet spot to where you can really identify those animals that are genetically more likely to be shedding early, therefore more likely to wean off heavier calves, or more likely to get pregnant if you're doing summer breeding for spring calves. There are a whole host of measurements. We talk about udder scoring, teat scoring. Maybe you monitor that, measure that, and see if that somehow ties into what performance you're seeing in your herd. There's a whole host, and not everybody's going to measure the same thing. We're trying to measure as many things that comes to mind that may be of some impact on animal performance. But it really just starts with the mindset of, hey, I need to be measuring what my animals are doing, because then, like I always say, we change our nutritional programs. We go to this new mineral. We go to this different forage program. We change our vaccination program. We do all of these things. We change our genetics. We do all of these things to do what? To improve performance in our herds, right? But how many of us measure performance to know that those changes made any effect? How do I know that new feed increased my weaning weights by 5%? How do I know that new forest that I moved to, or that new mineral that I use, improved fertility in the herd, or increase milk yield if milk yield is something? If I'm not measuring those things, we're gonna have some year-to-year variation. But yeah, we make a lot of management decisions to enhance performance, but we don't measure performance to know if we're even seeing any benefit of all that. Maybe I could roll back the cost of managing the herd and not have a major impact on productivity. Because we're not, we talked about earlier on about cattle getting too large. That was that push towards maximizing performance. And we don't want to maximize performance. And certainly for a breed like the Dexter that prides itself on that small size, we're certainly not trying to maximize anything. But we certainly want to know, are we staying within that box that we feel that the breed should be in? Some folks are going to breed for a little bit larger animal. Some may be breeding for a little bit smaller animal. I chuckle sometimes because we have folks that come in. We got folks that come in that they're wanting some Dexter steers, but you know what they always select? They always select the biggest ones. They always want the biggest ones in the pen. And so what does that say? If I keep increasing the size of the Dexters, will I keep increasing my sales? And so those are things that we have to think about, as we manage the herd. It's a rare heritage breed. And so as breeders, you have to be stewards of what you're working on. If we're feeling collectively that the breed is getting too large, how do you combat that if you're not collecting data? Now, we talked about earlier, Martha, we were talking earlier about artificial insemination, right? We're collecting these bulls and using these bulls. And I'll put it out there. How many AI bulls, Dexter AI bulls, have performance data that I could use to tell me that bull is going to increase hip height or moderate weaning weights or make any change in my herd? Any Dexter bull that's out there that I'm buying semen on, how much data comes with that bull that tells me how it's going to impact my herd genetically for performance? And my wife teaches AI, and she's always talking about AI and goats. And I would be like a dark cloud that rolls in and say, all that's fun and good. That biotech is really nice, But how do you know that AI buck is any better than the buck you have out on your place already? Okay, you don't know if there's no data. You don't know. And one thing that we noticed with our goats, and we ran the EPDs on the goats, is that the bucks that we were buying were no better. Actually, they were inferior than the bucks we were producing in the research herd. And we're paying
Wow.
a lot of money for these bucks, but none of them came with data. And so, I could say the same thing with the Dexter bulls. Now, how many bulls are coming with data that tells me that yes, this bull is going to increase my weaning weights by 5%, or it's going to produce daughters with higher fertility when I'm breeding them in the summertime. And so that's some of the data we're collecting is kind of show, where is the genetic variability that we're working with in the breed. And I just like throwing that out there. So hey, like I said, I'm a data person.
Well, we're going to wind it down. And if you learned anything today, it's that farmers and breeders are data collection scientists and data analysts, and you should be measuring everything.
Measure many things that you can that's important to your end objectives.
Absolutely. It all ties back into your farm's goals and what you want to be doing.
Yes.
So let's take one more question. That's another data question. Hi, Danny. Thanks for joining us today. Danny says, since your future plans include udder and teat classifying, will you also milk in the future and gather data on milk production?
Okay. Well, we're primarily going to look and see how it's tied to calf performance. We've talked about getting one of these little milk machines and milking cows out to look at direct milk production numbers, and that's something that we may look at. But like I said, I think at the top I noted that we're more looking at them from a beef perspective more than a dairy perspective. But if we collect enough teat and udder information, we may say, okay, we've got some good phenotypic records on the structure. Let's see if it influences milk yield directly by milking out a few of these cows that have different scores. But our intent is probably more looking at how it influences calf weaning weights. Does the udder and teat score somehow correlate to this cow's ability to wean off heavier or lighter calves, or whatever the case may be in terms of calf weights?
All right. Well, thank you, Danny. Well, I know I've learned a lot today. I think our viewers have too. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Martha, for being our guest host. We appreciate you. And thank you, Dr. Browning, for joining us and sharing all of your amazing knowledge. Martha, did you have any final questions before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I'm just always going to be interested to see what new data you keep coming up with. And it sounds like you have some future study that'll be really interesting to keep up with. So
yeah, I've got to keep collecting data so I can have something for these students to do when they roll through here. I can't come here and there's nothing to do. So we've already got to collect data for them. And for those of y'all that kind of want to get a sense of what we're doing, and sometimes we post animals for sale, that sort of thing. We have a website, but all you have to do is type in my name. See Richard Browning there, and TSU. There it is, right there. Just Google, Bing, whatever you use. That website will come up, and you'll see some of what we're doing with the cattle and with the goats. And I need to get up to update that with some more information. Maybe some of these early hair shedding values you might put up for stuff to share. But feel free to shoot me an email or call me up, or like I said, if you want to just drop by and visit, you're more than welcome to drop by and visit and see what we're doing, right and wrong.
Absolutely. So check out Dr. Browning and his work and everything they're doing over at the TSU, and go by for a visit. Next time I'm in Tennessee, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, stop by.
And Martha, since we're doing our shameless plugs, do you want to talk about Best Yet AI Sires?
Yeah, if you're curious about what my family and I are doing with the Dutch Belted and milking shorthorn dual-purpose dairy cow, You can go to our website, bestyetaisires.com, or follow us on Facebook. Ask any questions you have. It's a good time. There's lots of cow pictures all the time because they're so pretty, and especially pasture season, it's so perfect.
It's perfect photo season, like with green pastures and blue skies and just sunshine.
All the baby calves that are out there. Yes.
Absolutely. So yes, please go check out what Martha and her family are doing. They're doing some awesome work as well. And then Martha, you'll be back again with us in 2 weeks on the 21st, and we'll be talking about Florida Cracker cattle with a couple of the guys from the Florida Cracker Association.
Yeah, I am very, very curious to learn about that. I've always been intrigued by the Florida Crackers and would love to learn the history. So looking forward to that.
Absolutely. So we hope everyone will join us again on the 21st. Next week, we will be going live on Wednesday for a Woolly Wednesday with the natural spinner. So I hope you'll join Sandra and learn some more about natural spinning. Big thank you to Manna Pro for sponsoring the Cattle Chat today. We appreciate you. Also, a big thank you to all of our Livestock Conservancy members and supporters. We couldn't do educational programming or any of the work we do without you. So thank you for supporting us and supporting programs like this and all of the hard work that our cattle stewards are doing to help save those rare breeds. So thank you. If you're not a member and you want to become one, you can go to our website. That's livestockconservancy.org. We hope that you will check it out and see all the cute cow pictures that we're posting this month. And as we wrap up, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. I'm going to play our Manna Pro commercial where they feature some of our awesome rare breeds. So we hope that you will join us again next time and have a great time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Champions, colleagues,
roommates,
and personal trainers. Whatever role they play, they're an important part of our lives. In their quiet way,
and their not so quiet way.
They keep us young, on our feet, on the go. They pull us back to nature and push us toward the next adventure. And as much as we count on them, they count on us all the more.
To nurture their lives
with the same commitment. To protecting them, helping them grow, and thrive. Treating them as well as they treat us. By giving them a little more of our lives. Because no matter what role they play, out here or in here, we're here to make their lives the best they can be. Manna Pro, nurturing life.